Is it time to start believing in the LA Kings after two big road wins? We'll talk about that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we are on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the LA Kings played game 14 of the NHL season in Minnesota against the Wild, the second of back-to-back road games and the first of three meetings between the two teams. LA was coming off their most complete game of the season, a 3-0 shutout win in Nashville over the Predators the night before. But LA was taking on one of the top teams in the NHL so far in the Wild, and again, on back-to-back nights on the road. As for the Kings lineup against the Minnesota Wild, the forward group would not have Alex Turcotte. Remember, he was hurt in the game against the Predators, taking that hit along the boards. Looks like he's day-to-day. So to start the game, we would have a top line of Anze Kopitar centering Adrian Kempe and Andre Lee, although that wouldn't last too long. The second line was to start Phillip Danault with Trevor Moore and Kevin Fiala. Third line of Quentin Byfield, Alex Laferriere, and Warren Foegele. And Trevor Lewis would center the fourth line with Tanner Jeannot and Akil Thomas to start. The defense also would be the same as the night before. Again, to start, Mikey Anderson with Jordan Spence in the top pairing, Joel Edmondson and Brant Clark on the second pairing, and Vladislav Gavrikov and Kyle Burroughs on the third pairing. David Rittich was in net with Darcy Kemper getting the start the night before. As for my big question coming into this game for the LA Kings, could the Kings follow up a great road performance the night before with another great road performance against the team that's playing as well as any team in the NHL? Well, as for the game summary in this one, first period, the Kings didn't play poorly, but they only managed 2 shots on goal. The good news is goalie David Rittich looked like he was dialed in early, and the Kings and Wild played to a scoreless opening period. In the second period, the Kings would have a much better shot mentality, but it would be the Wild that would score the first goal of the game. Kings were behind 1-0, but the Kings would respond with a pair of goals in the period. Warren Foegele and then Kevin Fiala on the power play gave LA a 2-1 lead after 2 periods. In the third period, it was all Kings. LA getting 2 goals from Trevor Lewis, and Quentin Byfield gets his first goal of the season as the Kings end up skating off with a convincing 5-1 win in Minnesota. LA improves to 8-3-3 on the season and into sole possession of first place in the Pacific Division, 2 points up on Idle Vegas. The Kings have 19 points, second best in the Western Conference and third most in the entire NHL. Checking the game stats on this one, Kings get the 5-1 win. Shots on goal would end up favoring the Kings 28-24. That was after getting badly outshot in the opening period. Power play, special teams favored the Kings. They shut down Minnesota's power play, which went 0-4, while the Kings were perfect, going 1-for-1 with a man advantage. Face-offs favored the Kings 33-30. Hits favored the Kings 25-11. And block shots favored the Kings 13-9. So my big takeaway from this game, this may have been the best game of the season for the LA Kings. Now, I would still go with the Kings win over Vegas as the best game because of the circumstances. That win was over at the time, the top team in the Kings division. It came right after the worst loss of the season against the Sharks. So I thought that it was an opportunity for a statement game for the Kings, that they needed to bounce back and show some heart and some grit and some competitiveness. So I would still give that game to me as a slight edge over this game as the best game of the year. However, there's a real argument to be made that this was actually the best game of the season for the LA Kings. Record-wise, Minnesota had a slightly better record than Vegas. This win was on the road as opposed to the Kings beating the Golden Knights on home ice. And this was the second of back-to-back road games. Now, I'm sure we can all agree if this wasn't the best game of the year for the Kings, it was certainly a great win for the Kings. And no question in my mind that the Kings just posted the best back-to-back wins of the season and sweeping this mini 2-game trip and getting 4 points. Our quote of the game comes from Kings forward Quinton Byfield on winning the back-to-back games on the road. Q said, quote, obviously back-to-backs are hard. The first period was definitely their period, and we kind of had to focus in and start playing our game. But 2 big wins on the road, it's big for us, and hopefully we can carry this momentum, end quote. So what was good for the LA Kings from a team standpoint in this one? We'll talk about the individuals in a bit. I thought the penalty killing again was excellent. Not quite as dominant as it was in the Nashville game. Of course, the Predators got no shots on goal on 3 different power play opportunities, but it was still very good. Now, the Wild did get a few shots, but the Kings penalty kill has really, really been a positive of late. I thought there were even a couple of very questionable calls that went against the Kings. Brent Clark goes down on the ice, and he gets called for a trip. And then there was a really weak holding call on Kyle Burroughs. The Kings didn't care. They didn't get frustrated. They just went out and worked, and they killed off the penalties. The Kings have now killed off 18 of the last 19 power plays against. And we've talked about how sometimes, and we've referred to the Kings power play, but when the Kings, when a power play is not working, it can take away momentum from a team. I think the Kings have been gaining momentum from how good their penalty kill has been. And I think it has been taking away momentum from the Kings' opponents. And speaking of the power play, back-to-back games for the LA Kings with a power play goal. Kevin Fiala scoring on a one-timer in this one on the power play. So getting a power play goal in back-to-back games may not sound like a great accomplishment, but for the Kings, baby steps in getting that power play a little bit better. Obviously a big goal, though, in this one. Defensively, as a team, the Kings played a very solid game. Wild star Kirill Kaprizov did not have much in this one. Now, he did miss a good chunk of the second period when he took a puck to the face. But when he was in there, the Kings were collapsing around him throughout. They gave him a lot of attention. He did not have much time or space to make things happen. He came into the night tied for the NHL in points. But in this game against the Kings, no points. And he was a -2. So from top to bottom, a very good all-around effort for the Kings, offensively, defensively, and special teams. What was not so good for the Kings from a team standpoint, really only one thing I would point out, and that was a slow start, kind of. The lack of shots on goal in the open period, only getting 2 shots on goal in the opening period. Obviously, that's an issue. But it wasn't like the Kings were getting dominated if you saw the game. They did have some zone time pressure. They did get shots towards the net. Now, there were some that were off target. There were some that were blocked. Joel Edmondson hit a post. But you still need to get more than 2 shots on goal to start a game. Fortunately, the Kings were able to overcome a bit of a slow start and get the victory. Is it time to start believing in the LA Kings? I mentioned the record. I mentioned the point total. I mentioned where the Kings are in the standings. And my answer is maybe. It's amazing what a couple of wins can do. But to me, it's more than that. It's stringing 2 very good performances back-to-back on the road the way the Kings have. I think they have proven in these last 2 games, when they're on their game, the LA Kings can skate with any team in the NHL. Now, as Quinton Byfield pointed out, taking this momentum and being more consistent, that will ultimately prove whether the Kings are one of the better teams in the NHL or not over time. I would say I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing from the Kings, and it's maybe taken a little while, but the penalty kill in particular, They are getting offense from a lot of different players. We've seen Quentin Byfield now get on the board. Hopefully that gets him going. But I'm not ready to start believing yet the Kings are one of the top teams in the league, even though that's where they are in the standings right now. But the way things are going, I'm very encouraged by what we're seeing right now from the LA Kings and starting to get a little bit excited, to be honest with you. All right, coming up, we're going to get into the Kings players that stood out in this latest win over Minnesota, including a player who needed a goal and finally got a goal. I think you know who I'm talking about. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Just go to the PrizePicks app, make your picks right now, and you could be a winner. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California. Download the PrizePick app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's get into some individuals that stood out for the LA Kings in their win over the Minnesota Wild. And I want to start with an individual who wasn't on the ice, and that's head coach Jim Hiller. He's been pushing a lot of right buttons lately, from the Kevin Fiala benching to the shuffling of the lines to picking which goalie to start in back-to-back games. Now, I didn't agree with Andre Lee starting the game on the top line for Alex Turcotte, who was injured. I thought it should have been Akil Thomas. However, it didn't last long, and Hiller made some in-game adjustments that turned out to work well. Kevin Fiala eventually got bumped up to that top line. Akil Thomas got promoted off the fourth line, and Andre Lee eventually did wind up on that fourth line. Also, the defensive pairings were mixed up as well. We did see Vladislav Gavrikov and Mikey Anderson together. So it's all working so far for the Kings and Jim Hiller. And he certainly, it appears of late, and so far he's gotten the Kings to respond to some changes, especially that new aggressive penalty kill. So props to Jim Hiller for the job he's doing right now. Obviously, you always look at the goaltending. David Rittich. Again, I said I would have started Rittich against the Predators and Kemper against the Wild. Now, maybe that would have also resulted in 2 wins for the Kings. We'll never know. All we know is the facts are Kemper got the win in Nashville. Rittich got the win in Minnesota. And Rittich, I thought, was a key early in the game when the Kings are kind of struggling to get the offense going, get shots on goal. He had a very strong first period. Only goal he allowed was a point shot with lots of traffic in front. He flat out couldn't see the puck. No shame in allowing that goal at all. Otherwise, Rittich was solid, made 23 of 24 saves. He's now 5-0-1 in his career against Minnesota. So that could have well played a factor in Jim Hiller's decision to start Rittich against Minnesota and Kemper against Nashville. A guy we have not talked about a lot on this show is Trevor Lewis. And congratulations to the Kings veteran forward, reaching a milestone in that win over Minnesota with his 100th career NHL goal. He also got number 101 as well. And it didn't dawn on me until the announcers mentioned that that was his 100th goal. The game before, the night before, he could have had a good chance to get number 100 with an empty net goal against Nashville, but he unselfishly passed off the puck to Adrian Kempe, who ended up scoring the empty netter to seal the win. Total team player from Trevor Lewis. Pair of big goals in this one. Good to see him get that milestone and also contribute to the Kings getting a victory. Getting that third goal of the game was a big goal. Made it 3-1, and the empty netter was just some icing on the cake. So congrats to Trevor Lewis getting that 100th goal, and more importantly, getting a big goal that helped contribute to a Kings victory. Quentin Byfield, obviously great to see Q get a goal, a nice deflection on an equally nice pass from Vladislav Gavrikov. Byfield with the redirect, which we saw him do a few times this preseason. He's good at getting in front of the net, having a stick on the ice, and credit Gavrikov with putting it right on his stick, and he deflected it in nicely into the net. Hopefully This will get Quentin Byfield going as far as scoring goals. And I know there have been those Kings fans out there who haven't had a lot of patience with Quentin Byfield because of the lack of goal scoring. And that's fair. Bottom line is he hasn't been as productive putting the puck in the net as we would all like. However, I would point out that this isn't exactly a Pierre-Luc Dubois situation, right? PLD wasn't scoring last year, and he didn't give you much else either, right? Q has been giving you everything but the goal scoring. He's playing good defense. He's killing penalties. He's still flying around the ice. He's being active. And I think he has, even with the lack of goal scoring, I think he's been a positive factor for the Kings this season. Good to see him now back at center, where we wanted him to kind of be the whole time. And what has been lacking, he got last night, and that is a goal. So hopefully, again, this will get him going. I think the only thing that would have made it a perfect night for the LA Kings was to have seen Trevor Moore get a goal. He's still looking for that first one of the season, the only forward who's yet to score a goal other than Andre Lee. But Moore did have 2 assists, so he did contribute as well. I also wanted to mention Kings defenseman Mikey Anderson. He's been a rock defensively. Now, you're likely going to never be wowed by his play. It's not like he dishes out thunderous hits. He doesn't really lead the rush, not going to give you much offensively, but what he does do is set a tone defensively. And again, he's been great on the blue line this year, taking over more of a leadership role with Drew Doughty out. And he's just a guy that he's so reliable back there. And I wanted to point out the way he's played of late as well. And it doesn't matter who he's paired with. It's been at times Jordan Spence. It's been Vladislav Gavrikov at times. Doesn't matter. Mikey Anderson just goes out there, does his job, and killing penalties as well. So did want to mention Mikey Anderson as well. Not going to jump out stats-wise, but doing a great job leading that Kings defense as well. This was a great team win for the LA Kings. A lot of different guys contributing. Everybody, frankly, contributing. We had 11 different Kings getting points. 4 different players had multi-point games. We talked about Trevor Lewis with a pair of goals. Quentin Byfield had the goal and an assist. Alex Laferriere had a couple of helpers. And we mentioned Trevor Moore had 2 assists as well. So that leads us to us selecting our 3 stars of the game. We will do that in a moment. Also revisit a trade that went down between the Wild and Kings. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And of course, FanDuel is there for you to bet on college football. College basketball has started up. Of course, the NHL and the NFL. We've got Thursday night football tonight in Baltimore, an AFC North clash as the Ravens host the Cincinnati Bengals. Baltimore's favored by 6.5 points. The over-under for the game is 52.5. And how about the NBA? We've got the Lakers in Memphis tonight to take on the Grizzlies. Lakers are getting 1.5. Over-under that one is 230.5. And the Clippers are hosting the Philadelphia 76ers. Clippers are favored by 1 point. The over-under in that game is 216.5. Join FanDuel. Browse the latest betting odds of your favorite sports and teams in the Sportsbook app and get in on the action. You'll get started in $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, it is one of my favorite times in the show, and that is picking the 3 stars of the game because we only do that when the Kings win. As I mentioned, a lot of different candidates for the 3 stars of the night, but I'm going to go with Mikey Anderson as my number 3 star. Talked about it earlier. Been so good defensively, and this is to recognize Mikey Anderson, but also to kind of he's taking this on as a representative of the entire defense as well. My number 2 star is Alex Laferriere. He had 2 points, 2 primary assists in this one, including a nice feed to Kevin Fiala on the power play for the one-time goal. Laferriere continues to rack up the points. He's got 13 now on the season, which is second on the team. But my number 1 star is the veteran Trevor Lewis, not Trevor Moore. If you're watching on YouTube, that is incorrect. It's Trevor Lewis, not Trevor Moore, with his 2-goal game. And congratulations to Trevor Lewis for getting his 100th goal of his NHL career as well. Trevor Lewis is my number one star of the game for the win over the Minnesota Wild. Now, just like every time the Kings play the Senators, we're always going to talk about Quentin Byfield and Tim Stützle. As you probably know, it was the decision: would the Kings take Stützle? Would the Kings take Byfield? They ended up taking Byfield. And Stützle's had a very good start to his career for the Ottawa Senators, but hopefully in the end, Quentin Byfield will have the better and longer career, but we'll see. So every time the Minnesota Wild and LA Kings play over the next few years, we're going to talk about Kevin Fiala and defenseman Brock Faber. I've said it time and time again that this was a move the Kings needed to make, and it's been a solid trade for both teams. The Kings filled an area of need, getting a top 6 forward while giving up a good young player from a position where the Kings had depth with Brant Clark and Jordan Spence waiting in the wings. Now, if you watched the game last night, and again, Brock Faber finished runner-up last year in the Calder Trophy, Rookie of the Year. Looks like he's going to be a fine young defenseman for many, many years. But if you watch the game last night, who stood out in that game? It was no question it was Kevin Fiala. Faber had no points. He was a -1. And I get that Fiala was a forward, so there's more opportunities maybe for him to kind of make an impact. I didn't honestly notice Brock Faber much at all in this game. Now, I'll be fair. I am focusing more on the Kings than I am on the Wild. But there were some players that were certainly noticeable. Matt Boldy was really good for Minnesota. I thought he was the best player on the ice for the Wild. Just again, revisiting that trade, I think it was a good trade for both teams. Brock Faber is a good young defenseman, but I think the Kings, I would make that trade again in a heartbeat. It's been a great trade for the Kings. Sure, Kevin Fiala has his moments every now and then that kind of make us shake our heads, but overall, when he's going right, as he has been, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Kings are playing some of their best hockey of the season now that Kevin Fiala is playing his best hockey of the season. He's just an energy guy. He makes things go. He has elite skills, and when he's going right, he's very good for the LA Kings. We mentioned it, not taking any penalties at all of late, getting points, and just making things happen. So I know that there are some out there who will say that trade was a bad trade for the Kings. I completely disagree. That was a good trade for the Kings. Kevin Fiala, well, like I said, when he's going, is a really important player for the Kings. And Brock Faber is a good player too. It's been a good trade for both teams. But in the end, like I said, I will absolutely make that trade every time. Apparently, the Kings have a new tradition. I don't know if you've caught this or not. This was on social media after the Nashville game. I don't think I saw it after the Minnesota game, but I may have missed it. But anyway, it seems like baseball and hockey, and I don't watch much of the NBA anymore, so maybe they do it too. But after the game, after a win, the players will have something that they give out to like the player of the game. Sometimes it's a hat, sometimes it's a jacket, sometimes it's just whatever. In baseball, when guys hit home runs, they'll come into the dugout and they'll wear something or they'll be given something. I remember like the Seattle Mariners, when they hit a home run, they've got like a trident waiting for them in the dugout when they get handed. Anyway, it's a fun thing. But the Kings apparently have this thing they're calling the driver of the game, and they're giving this to whoever the player of the game is. Against Nashville, it was Darcy Kemper with the shutout. So I guess I'm not a motorsports guy. I guess there's a Formula One driver who is a Kings fan, and they have like a mini helmet of his, and they're passing this out to the driver of the game. And I'm not really on board with it. Why is it not a full-sized helmet? Why does, I don't know the name of the guy. I apologize, but apparently whoever this guy is, Formula One driver who's a fan of the Kings, I'm sure he would be more than happy to donate one of his real helmets that he uses. And that should be what the players put on their head afterwards. You don't have to wear it very long, just enough to take a picture and wave to your teammates or whatever. But it's a little tiny helmet. It looks like you would go put it on a small dog or something. And Darcy Kemper kind of set it on top of his head. I don't know. It's not a big deal. but I'm not really a big fan of this. Again, get a full-sized helmet for the guys to put on and have a good time with it and have it be fun. So I don't know about this driver of the game and the mini helmet. Not a huge fan of it. All right, I mentioned briefly on Tuesday's show, but if you watch the last two games of the Kings locally, you will notice that Nick Nixon has not been on the call, the Hall of Famer. There has not been an explanation from the Kings on this. Some people speculated maybe he was sick, but I think if he was sick, they would have announced it. I think it was simply, look, Nick is in his final year broadcasting the games. We've seen other broadcasters not go on the road at certain times. And it was a real quick 2-day road trip. And maybe they gave the option to Nick Nixon of saying, hey, if you don't want to go, you can sit this one out and we'll let Josh Schaefer handle the play-by-play duties. And my speculation is that that's what Nick did. He opted out of this little trip. As for Josh Schaefer, you may or may not know, he was the voice of the Kings affiliate in the AHL, the Ontario Reign, since 2021. But he left that job to join the LA Kings broadcast crew this season. He's been a part of the Kings pregame show on radio and doing some other things as well in social media. He hasn't been doing this too long. He graduated, I believe, from Arizona State in 2020. But he has filled in for Nick Nixon. I think he did it last year, one game when Nick was sick. I know he did the rookie face-off games online with Daryl Evans. Like I said, Nick Nixon's in his final year. Josh Schaefer has been working with the Kings organization. Kind of looks like maybe they're grooming him for the job, right? 1 and 1 equals 2 here. You've got Nick going out, and this kid's been a part. I shouldn't call him a kid. This young man has been a part of the Kings broadcast crews in the organization, first in the AHL, now with the Kings. So it just kind of feels like that's the direction it's going. If that in fact is the case, obviously it's a tremendous opportunity for Josh to get some NHL experience. I thought he did a solid job in both games, and he should only get better with experience, but we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. And we'll need to get Josh on the show here. We had him on once. I think it was last year or year before last, but we haven't had him on in a while. So we're going to try and get Josh Schaefer to come on. We'll ask him. He probably won't answer, but we'll ask and see if maybe he's getting ready to be the next voice of the LA Kings. All right, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on tomorrow's show, we're going to preview the Kings-Canucks matchup and maybe have a special guest as well. Friday's show will be a recap of the Kings-Canucks game. That's in LA. And we will have our weekly fan feedback show on Friday, of course, as well. We would love for you to be a part of that show. If you want to get in on it, send us an email on whatever you're feeling about the LA Kings right now. I'm guessing it's pretty good. LockedOnEddie@gmail.com is the email address, EDDIE. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section, and we'd love you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.